Thanks for everybody being here tonight. I asked Anita about this. Actually, I think I asked Alex about this, and then she referred me to Anita back in like July. So we've had this thing on the books for a while now. So a little bit about me. I have just completed like 45 days at Orion. So as a first-time new Salesforce employee position there, finished my group project in July. So wasn't long between that and then when I got a request for interviews from them, and then getting hired not too long after that. Prior to that, I spent 8.5 years on the live event side of things. So doing concerts, doing big sporting events, doing corporate events. The company that I've most recently worked for is the production company for Dream, whatever it's called. So when I was talking to their account rep for that, he was like, yeah, we watch everything in our system move from every shop to the West Coast about a month before it happens. And nothing else goes out of any of our shops because everything that we have is out there in San Francisco for this event. Sadly, I did not get a call for one more event to go do that one this year. I would have asked for unpaid time off for that to make it out there. And then before that, I spent a few years working for software companies, which is where I got introduced to Jira to begin with, and continued contracting with that company even while doing events. So that brings you up to today and my experience with Salesforce and my experience with Jira. So when we started our group project and we got the list of requirements, I knew that I didn't want to try to organize all of that inside of a Google spreadsheet. And it was a good opportunity to grab a free Jira account and teach my teammates how to use Jira, since they will likely encounter that one day in their careers. If you're working on a project, doing any kind of work, it is likely to be something that you'll run into one day. So the way this is going to run tonight, I'm going to hand things over to Peter for a little while. He's going to kind of give you a high-level overview of what Jira looks like in an actual real kind of environment. Peter, I'll let you handle your full introduction once I hand it over to you. If you've got any questions as we go through this, I've got the chat open, so just drop them in the chat. And then both of us are kind of keeping an eye on that. So if you've got anything specific that either of us can address kind of as we're going through it, we'll just grab those questions. And then if we don't grab them while we're going through that, we'll address those once Peter's kind of done doing his spiel. And then once he's done, I'm going to kind of walk you through what our Jira project looked like for our group project, and then just giving you a real quick overview of how to actually get your free account set up so you can start playing around with Jira in your free time. So with that, Peter, it is all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Anita, and good evening or afternoon or whatever it might be for everyone that's on the call. I want to start very briefly, just a quick intro of myself, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Orion, and then more specifically, and the reason why everyone's here is Jira, how we use it, some real life examples. I'll talk to you a little bit about where I've seen it used, where we currently use it in our delivery process, and some of the benefits of the tool. But first and foremost, and it's funny, hearing Chris's background and as well as mine, and probably many of you on the call, and the path that we've all kind of taken to where we are now, right, when it comes to Salesforce and Talent Stacker and how we found our way into this world. So I took a bit of a different angle myself. I started in the finance industry. So I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of college and thought I was going to go sell stocks and make millions of dollars because that's what they did on TV, right? And they had nice cars and watches, and I was going to do that. Quickly realized I wasn't much of a salesperson and moved into more of a financial planning and analysis role. And interestingly, all along the way, I always had an affinity for different systems, whether that was Salesforce or NetSuite or Jira, as an example. And throughout my career, I tended to be the de facto admin for a lot of different systems. And prior to joining Orion, I headed up a group of folks that managed our internal business system. So it was a 2,500 employee company, and we were responsible for the third-party software, carrying and feeding and enhancements on those tools, one of them being Salesforce, and really working with Salesforce for the last I guess now 15, 16 years, fell in love with the tool. Fast forward to about 3 years ago, where I joined Orion. And I'll tell you a little bit about Orion, but typically my role is I head up the professional service team. So basically what that means is as we close projects, as we start projects, I help to make sure we have the right resources, staff them accordingly with the engagement managers and BAs and solution architects and technical architects, depending on the size and shape and complexity, as well as generally act as an escalation point during projects, both at the start, right, get things off on the right foot, and then towards the tail end, make sure the client is happy and things wrap up properly. So what I'm going to do now, and who doesn't love PowerPoint, right? I'm going to share a few slides, just really keep up on the screen more as talking points for us, if you don't mind, and then we're going to get into it a little bit more, like you said, about Jira itself. So as Chris mentioned, or at least he mentioned to me, I don't know if he mentioned it at the start of this call, but this is not a Jira training, right? I am not a Jira expert, so I just want to keep that at the forefront and make sure everyone is aware of that. But before we get into Jira, I want to tell you a little bit about Orion. So most of you folks are probably familiar with Salesforce implementation partners, right? So that's what Orion is. We are a boutique Salesforce implementation partner located in Manhattan, strategically across from the Salesforce Tower in Bryant Park, right? What a coincidence. We can walk across and we can see all of our Salesforce AEs and account reps over there. But Orion itself, it's a bit of a unicorn when it comes to the Salesforce implementation partners, where we have both an advisory service division and a Salesforce implementation division. I'm not going to get into all the bullets that are on here and all the logos that are on the slide, because this is not a pre-sales call or a kickoff call. But I did just want to mention that, when you get into the Salesforce ecosystem, you'll likely come across other firms like ours, right? Whether it's looking for a job or dealing with other solution architects on projects, you may come across folks like us. But just wanted to mention what we do, both advisory and Salesforce. Our advisory business is a little bit more system agnostic, and they'll do more of the people, process, technology analysis within an organization. Whereas on the Salesforce side, where Chris and I are, that's more of your traditional Salesforce implementation, whether it's from the ground up, greenfield implementation, someone just bought a couple licenses and we're going to implement. Could be projects to existing orgs, could be all sorts of different flavors. Maps and territory planning, big part of our business. It's where Chris is spending a lot of his time. But we do dabble in all the different clouds. We try and keep up with all of them, which is a bit of a challenge, but we have some folks that are certified in just about all of the. This slide here, now that we get into Jira, I just wanted to show you this real quick. This is our delivery process, right? And as you can see, at Orion, at probably any firm that you're going to work with or any team that you work with, there are a lot of steps in a process. There's also a lot of tools in a process, right? In our tool belt, you'll see that there are quite a few icons on here. Big Microsoft shop, you see a lot of those, right? And you can see just from left to right, we don't have to go through all the steps of the process, but you can see where Jira plays a part, right? So it doesn't really get into the Orion delivery process until we're in our build phase. Up until that point, when we're going through our pre-sales and our planning and our kickoff and our discovery, for the most part, we're taking those notes, we're capturing all that information outside of Jira. Once we have all the requirements, we put together a solution blueprint for the client. They say, yes, looks good. Great. Let's get everything into Jira. Chris, I assume you're manning the chat. If I should stop, if I should slow down, if I should.
Yeah. Yep. I'll let you know.
Okay. Fantastic. So what I'd like to do now is I have this up here, but I'm actually going to jump into a test project that I built in Jira. One of the things that I will say, and depending on the type of person you are, I'm a bit type A, probably why I went into project management, right? And everything has a place and there's a place for everything. And I want everything in a certain order. And what I found is there's really no wrong way to use Jira, right? It's one of those tools where it gives you a lot of flexibility, which is good. And if you can be flexible and if you can articulate and you could envision what you want the tool to do, you could pretty much do it, right? You can customize it, you can build it a different way. I've used Jira in a couple of different organizations that all use it differently. Even at Orion, we have different projects and we use it differently, right? So it depends on the people that you're working with. Oftentimes, it'll depend on the client that we're working with, right? So depending on who you are supporting or who your audience is, they may not be the most technical folks, right? We're working on our project now with an insurance company, and they're brand new to Salesforce, right? And you're taking away their pen and paper, and now you're introducing Salesforce and then Jira. So all these tools, you have to know your audience, and you can be pretty flexible with it. So what I'd like to do for the next few minutes, if you will, if you would let me show you a little bit about this project, right? So this project, again, I put it together. It's not a real project, obviously. We have a bunch that we have, but there's some client information, and Chris and I were talking about it and cleaning it up and whatnot. So I said, you know what, let me throw this together. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. What you'll see within Jira, the way that we typically use the tool is to build epics, which are generally going to be your group of like stories, right? Stories that are all related to one goal, right? One object. A lot of times is how we structure our projects, as you'll see here: leads, accounts, contacts, and so on. And the reason why we do that is for reporting. It also helps you understand when you can actually complete an epic and when you can get most of this a body of work complete. All customizable, obviously. We've added all these epics. We've added all these user stories. A couple things that I wanted to show you real quick around the customization. So if we look at an actual user story, you'll be able to see that if I look at the ticket itself, right? Ticket, user story, whatever. People call them different names. But if you look at this tool, we've added our own flavor, right? We've added what's the proposed solution? What is the acceptance criteria? These are all fields. And again, I'm a finance guy at heart. I am not Salesforce certified. I dabble in a few things, right? I can make my way through a few things, but with the tool like Jira, it's very easy. Drag and drop. You create a field, it asks you what field type, and you're done. Another big one too, you can add something like a checkbox here, right? Was it in the budget? Yep, it was, right? Because that's going to be very important when clients continually ask for new things that weren't necessarily in the budget or in scope. Before I go too much further, the other thing I just wanted to show you guys is when you have your backlog of tickets, right, you'll have your various sprints, which is going to show you what work is being done when. You can create those sprints, drag and drop these stories from the backlog into the sprint. And then more importantly, the best part about Jira for us, how we use it as a tool, how I feel like it helps the team both internally at Orion as well as the client move through the process is when you look at the tickets that are in a sprint, when you look at it at the board view. So typically what we do is we create additional custom statuses. So thank you. So out of the box, or general Jira is going to be your statuses of to do, in progress, and done. What we like to do is we create 2 additional statuses for client input needed and ready for UAT and demo. I'll tell you why we do that. So generally when we start a project, you'll probably deal with this as well. We don't only keep Jira access to Orion. Oftentimes we have our clients in here and all resources on the team, both at the client and ours. So BAs, the solution architects, technical architects, EMs, project managers that are on my team, they're all in here. And one of the benefits of having a status of client input needed is when we have the daily stand-ups, when we have our daily, or sometimes we'll have them less frequent on the size of the project, but when we have those calls with the dev team and with the client, very quickly draws your eyes to, oh, what's my blocker? What do I need from the client? What tickets need information from them, so we can easily see that. In addition, we then can drag tickets into the ready for UAT. So 2 weeks out, when we do our sprint demo, we know exactly what's ready, what we can expect to show the client, and the client will know what to expect during that demo. So couple of things that I wanted to just touch on that Chris mentioned, or that Chris asked me to cover specifically. Definitely saves Orion and the client time from you're not emailing back and forth about each ticket, right? With each ticket, you're living in Jira. Non-technical folks can easily get up to speed. You can mention users on a ticket, so you're constantly keeping that collaboration back and forth with clients. I personally, full disclosure, at first I didn't like it. I'm not gonna lie. At first I didn't like it, and Chris is shaking his head. It's probably the same feeling that others have had. But once you get into it and once you start to use it more, you start to see the amount of collaboration that the teams are having, the back and forth communication, more importantly, the trail that you have, right? So when you start a project, you start with a requirement that's like this, but then it goes back and forth, and there's a comment, and the client asks for this, and there's a bug to it, or there's an additional task added, and very easily can get lost in emails and spreadsheets and all sorts of other tools. Here, having them all in one place, all related to the same or the original requirement, just makes it a lot easier, even towards the end of the project when you're trying to build training material and trying to build out your use cases for testing purposes. So having it all here in place has been a huge help. Definitely recommend you folks looking at some of the videos. The good thing about Jira, similar to, obviously not on the same scale as Salesforce, but to a tool like Salesforce, is there's a lot out there in terms of help, right? Their help documentation is very robust and easy to find because it is a very widely used tool in the industry. Any questions that came in the chat, or anyone that wants to be brave enough to take themselves off mute and ask?
Yeah, no questions, but yeah, if you've got any questions at this point, feel free to speak up.
Hi, I'll go. This is Nikita. I'm just curious. I'm not sure if you have any experience with Microsoft Planner, but just curious, like, how is this different from Microsoft Planner?
It's a good question. I have a little bit of experience with it, as you saw from the previous diagram. We are definitely a Microsoft shop, the Google Suite, right? So we have all those other products, and I made an attempt to use it. The challenge that I had with that was the flexibility with external access, right? So when you want to share certain things with clients outside of the domain, it got to be a little dicey, and also the learning curve on that for some of the clients that are a little less familiar with the tool like that, it was a bit steeper. I didn't give it a full-blown try, I'm not going to lie, but looking at the two next to each other, I think Jira was just a little bit easier for folks to adopt.
We just got one. Yeah, we just got a question from Jared asking how easy is it to sync tickets in Salesforce over to Jira? And he has apparently tried to go from Jira to Salesforce and knows that can be difficult, but specifically asking about the other direction, or if you've used anything that makes it easy to solve both directions.
You stumped me, Jared. I haven't had the pleasure or the difficulty, as it sounds like you've had, to experience that. One of the integrations that I have worked with Jira before is we use a tool called Smartsheet, which we could have a whole other session on that, but for project management purposes, so you can link Jira and Smartsheet, but I don't have experience with the Salesforce and Jira connection.
Have you done anything with that, Anita, on any of your projects? I know you work with a bunch of clients as well.
So our Jira stories pull into Copado, which is in Salesforce. It has to do with deployment and DevOps for anyone who's not familiar. But the other way around, no, I have not seen that.
You're on your own, Jared.
But if you figure it out, let us know.
Thanks. I'm trying to convince everybody to go back to Jira.
So, are you trying to to basically populate a Jira setup?
Yeah.
Using fun times.
we have an overly complicated ticketing system, and we were way more productive using Jira.
So yeah, it happens.
The,
Brandon, I just to answer Brandon's question real quick, I am on the MAPS implementation team, working in the Jumpstart program. So Jumpstarts are basically a 4 to 8 week project where we work with MAPS Advanced, and territory planning, and like 3 people have used the live tracking portion of it, from what I understand. So that's where you start out coming into Orion with the limited background that I've got, and then Peter has been there much longer and is much higher up and is head of professional services. So.
Yeah, one thing I was going to say too about Jira, one of the other ways that we use it, speaking of ticketing, so part of at Orion, we have a division that's more managed services. So it's more of a, the truth is a lot of it comes as post-implementation, right? Clients that stick around, they don't have an admin on staff, they need the additional support. So they use Orion as an arm of their internal staff. And for those tickets as well, or for those clients and those types of projects, we also use Jira. A little bit different, more of a task tracking, right? And they're entered directly from the client, enters the tickets directly, less about sprints, and they're more they almost use it like case management, to be honest, like Salesforce cases, but they're using Jira. So that's another use case that I've seen where it's a bit more of a task tracker than a full-blown agile project.
Anyone else have any questions for Peter? Next up, we'll be jumping into the Jira project that I set up for our group to kind of really give you a deep dive look into what a more fleshed out project looks like. Anita wants to know what your favorite feature that no one knows about is in there.
Good question. I don't know if no one knows about it, but when you first create a project, there are 2 choices that you have for project types. One is a company managed project and one is a team managed project. So the main difference there is that with the company managed project, all of the Orion Jira settings are automatically applied. Permissions, security, access, views, which is great. And I'll come back to that in a second. The team managed is a little bit, it's more flexible, right? You can make all sorts of customization. But the benefit of the company managed projects is that any customization you make applies to all projects. So, for example, we know that we want a field on a Jira ticket that says proposed solution. All of our projects, I'm going to go to my company managed project settings and add that field. So now it's on every new project that gets created. If not, if I create a team managed project and add fields there, I have to do it for every team managed project. So there's pros and cons to both, to be honest, right? Where all of your changes will flow down to all of the company managed projects, which is great because you change it once and it applies to all the projects. And then the team managed project gets to be a little bit, gives you a little more flexibility. The one thing I'll say, the last thing I'll say about that is typically when we're sharing projects with clients, we go the team managed route, right? Versus the more internal. Again, great documentation out there. The company versus team, the company managed projects actually allow for parallel sprints, which is interesting. And it's an interesting concept, right? And we don't have to get into a whole agile methodology conversation and talk about that, but I was talking to somebody about the other day, like, well, why would you want parallel sprints? And I said, well, it's a great question, but yet I do. I don't know why, but I do. But, because a lot of times, again, if everything that goes into that one sprint gets done in that period of time all the time, it would be great. But the reality is, maybe it's, again, the type A. I don't want to close that sprint and muddy it up into the second one. I want to keep that one out there and know that there's 1 or 2 things left, right? Jared, look, maybe I scored a point. Now I'm back on his good side. He uses them also. So, yeah, again, it definitely, it's part of my OCD, I think. But, and that's the other thing, the feature that no one knows about. Folks know about the parallel sprints, but it's only available on the one project type. So, I don't know if it's enough to make your decision on what project type you want to use, but it's just something to consider.
Can you pull the company managed settings into a team project so that you can then customize further?
You can. I found out the hard way. I found out some of that the hard way where, I had a client A that was looking at client B's board. And I was like, well, no, you can't do that, right? We got to quickly change that. But yeah, so you definitely can.
Right. If you want to go ahead and stop your share, I'll switch over to mine. Hopefully I've got this size right because I'm running this on a 4K monitor, and that makes things real small in my experience for everybody else watching. So we want to see this project. All right. Is this large enough for everybody to actually see this on your screen?
Yes.
Look good, Chris. One question that did come in the chat while you're switching, Jira certification is useful for job applicants. I see it more and more on resumes for sure. I definitely think that for a small shop like ours that uses the amount that we use Jira, it only gets bigger. The bigger the tools that are out there, some of a lot of our clients that are on the technology side use it across their organization. So they have all different teams in there. So it definitely can't hurt. I don't know what entailed in getting that certification, but I'm a big proponent of another few letters after your name on LinkedIn can't hurt. So for a tool like this, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, they've got, I think it's 2 or 3 different levels of it. So you've got you use the Atlassian hosted version of it, certification, and then you have your self-hosted, you manage it yourself version. I think there's some intermediate, advanced kind of additional certs available in there for it. So yeah, it was one I'd looked at as well at one point just to see what was involved with it. Cool. Peter, you're welcome to stick around if you want to. If not, you can bail if you need to go deal with the dogs that I heard barking in the background.
I'll probably put myself on mute and just listen in.
Cool, sounds good. So this is the project that I set up for my group project back in July. Some of this is going to be not best case way of setting things up because I was building things in about 3 hours to get this whole project spun up and off the ground and starting to enter our tickets to it. But as you can see, this is the main projects view where all of our items that we were given for this project ended up living. I don't know how many people in this group have either already gone through your project or are in the midst of it or are waiting to be put into the next month of it or are still quite a ways away from it. But basically, you're given a Google Sheet with a bunch of options. And then if you've ever worked on a project, you know that when somebody says, hey, I need you to make Salesforce work for me, that means that I have about 1,000 other pieces of that question. So you kind of get to start flexing your business analyst skills a little bit at the top of this project. Hey, okay, so the instructions are, I need to escalate a ticket when somebody has been, behind the schedule for a while. All right, so what does that mean? That means that I need to add this checkbox for it. It means I need to add a validation rule for it. I need to add potentially a flow for it. I need to add X, Y, and Z permissions to those things. All of those end up getting broken down into separate tasks. There's ways to organize these things for the sake of keeping this easy. I'm just going to use tasks for those, but know that there are 5 or 6 other things that are a task. I'm not going to get into how stories and epics and all of that work for this, but going into one of these things, you click on the name of it, you can see that we've got descriptions of it. I've linked some other issues to it that maybe either stem from that bigger issue. They could be things that are just related. So, if one of them is make a report for this thing, that could include I have to go create a report, or I need to go add some fields to an object, or I need to also add that to a dashboard, or multiple different pieces that need to be involved in that. In order to fully track it and make sure you're getting everything done, you want to try to break that down into the smallest components that you can, so that you, as you're going through this, can track, hey, we have completed this step of the project. We know that we can now move to the next part. So it's kind of what I did. Again, it's a rough, dirty version of that actual process. Somebody like Anita, who has Scrum certifications, has probably drilled these things down into 15 other pieces beyond just this. So she will fully understand what's going on there. And then you can add a bunch of different fields to these things, like Peter was showing. The layouts can be different depending on the project type. And then the bottom is where you have your activity for commenting. So if you do an @ just like any other system, you do an @ and you can tag the people that are in your project for it. You send them a note, they get an alert for that. We also kind of roughly set up epics, which are your big picture scope projects of things. And then I added some components, just again, really kind of playing around with it. But as you get into bigger projects, you'll start seeing, hey, this is the big picture that we're working on will be our epic for that. And then you'll see what components are related to that. And you may see a dozen other fields here related to that. And if they're using things like GitHub, you may see links pulling back into that. So this details column, I wish I still had access to my old company's software boards, because they had done some pretty impressive things with the related tags, the things that could be pulled in from various systems while building out software project. And you've got different views. If you've seen the Kanban view inside of Jira or inside of Salesforce, so the same process, click and drag back and forth between different fields. The roadmap gives you a slightly different view of this depending on how your project is set up. Again, depending on the access that you have to a project, you may see some of these things, you may not see some of these things. Backlogs are used as part of your sprint planning. I threw the link to what a sprint is in the chat if you scroll back up a little bit, but basically it's a 10 to 14 day schedule of work where you have a meeting at both ends of it to say, here's what we're working on, here's what we got done. And you are basically at the start of that planning the work that's going to go into that sprint. You'll have a scrum master who's responsible for moving things around between these different sprints and basically making sure that all the BS that comes up when you're working on stuff is dealt with outside of your project, and that you're focused on the work that needs to get done in the right timing that you've got. And you kind of scroll ahead. If you get work done, you can move ahead and grab work and pull it back to you. But the main view here is your issues view, where you can see, the different type of work. When you're looking at a task, this one's marked done already. You'll have, depending on what your org is set up for, you'll have different statuses in there. Again, a lot of this looks like what you may see in Salesforce, just in a different layout. When you're working on, different opportunities, whatever, it moves through a pipeline. Things inside of Jira move through a pipeline. Things get reported by somebody, things get assigned to somebody. Work gets moved around between, different people on there. And then, the admin side of it, if you ever get into this, you can really mess up your org if you have admin access. When you go in and start, I'm on the wrong page. It also gets confusing because there's like 5 different settings inside of Jira when you're trying to build something. And apparently it has moved since the last time I looked at how to edit a project. Now I can't get back to my project. There we go. Over here, it's over here now, project settings. Yeah, there we go. So you can give it, different names for everything. Yes, Bruce, this is the free version. So we'll look at setting up an org here in just a minute, but you can set up a free version. I think it's up to 5 people. So this is why I picked it for our group project, because I knew I'd be able to add everyone in our group to this. So you've got all of your different settings inside of this. There's really no point in trying to get into this too much right now. Read documentation. That's the only way that I figured out how to do half of this as I was setting it up. Atlassian has fantastic docs as far as big companies go. They're very clean. They're kept up to date. They've got a lot of tutorial videos and things like that. So let me get my other window set up to show you how to actually set one of these up. I'm also going to throw a link into the chat if you guys want to follow along with this next part. So this is the link to go directly to their free sign up page, but I'll walk you through how to actually get to this as well. All right, so Atlassian is an Australian company. They are the people that own Jira. I did not actually know they were Australian until like a year ago, and I've been using them on various projects since 2010. So surprised when I found out they're from the other side of the world. They make a variety of projects. The 2 that we used for our project is Jira, which is your issue tracker. And then Confluence is a documentation product that they have. If you're, I'm blanking, what's the Quip inside of Salesforce? Is probably the equivalent inside of Salesforce to it. I don't know if it's as full featured as what Confluence does, but inside of that, you can do all kinds of documentation for it. And if you've been in the business world for any amount of time, you may have actually used Trello for organizing kind of your pin boards. Just basically like you're putting postcards up on the wall and then moving things around. They got bought a while ago, I believe, by Atlassian. So once you're here, projects page, you click on Jira software, and that's where that get it free link is from. So I'm going to sign up for just the Jira software, and you can add any of these things later. So I'll put in, see if it'll let me do another one with my same email address. Nope. Yep. Stand by. Get an email here.
We need elevator music.
Hold on, I gotta change tabs again because why would it open up in the browser window that I was actually using? All right, back to the project. Here we go. So once you've signed up and created your password in your non-shared Zoom screen, the next thing it's going to ask you for is just a site name for it. Again, no credit card required to set this up, unlike a lot of other free versions of things. This is where you can kind of pick some of the defaults of what your project is going to be for. So for our project, I set up as a software development project, and then I set my role as project manager for it. This kind of sets some of your defaults within your project. If you don't like something, you know, close out of it, make a new project, try something else. And you can skip any of these as well if you want to. So I'm just going to skip over the rest of these to speed this up a little bit. Hopefully this doesn't take as long as it takes to get a dev org set up inside of Salesforce. And I heard somebody volunteer to be our elevator music.
Jared
is multi-talented.
Jared's got it. He does dual sprints and elevator music. All right, so I'm just going to do new to Jira, just so you guys can see the full setup experience, because I don't know if it skips anything. And then I have a tight schedule. So if you're setting this up, you know, for your talent stacker project, you've got, you know, 4 or 5 weeks to get this thing done and about 4 minutes to get it all built. So you're going to want to get it all set up as quick as you can. So this is where you get some different templates. I'm kind of winging this here because they have changed some of this setup. So you can set, you know, what kind of purpose you need for your project. So we're going to do Scrum, which is where we're just going to be building it, doing a project like what you saw me demo inside of my org. And then this is where Peter was talking about the type of project, where it's either team managed or company managed. So I'm going to set mine up as a team managed project because there is no company here. The key is what's used on your tickets. So this can vary between boards that you set up in different projects. So it's basically the auto number filled for it. Just a handful of the integrations that you can use for it. Everybody's familiar with Slack, Microsoft Teams. GitHub is for code tracking along with GitLab. CircleCL is another development tool for command line interface, most likely. Zendesk is for help tickets. It's like a help desk, Google Sheets. I'm familiar with Sentry and Jenkins. I believe we use this at my old company. It's basically watching to make sure that your project is working and kind of a continual delivery tool to make sure everything keeps working in the background. I'm not going to invite any of you. And then we're done and we're into the project. And then once you're in, you can take the tour, explore by myself, close all the pop-up windows like you do in every other program. And this is where you start relying on documentation. So you'll spend a lot of time in your project settings, getting things organized for it, changing your weird gorilla icon to something else, setting up your issue types, setting up your statuses, figuring out how to build your ticket layouts for everything. If you like to dabble, it's a great spot to be in. If you hate trying to build things from scratch, find somebody else to help you out, because it may be too much, kind of overwhelming there a little bit. But I mean, once you're in, you can kind of start out, from scratch with it. Once you're in, click on the create button to make your first ticket. And this really could be as far as you go for this project. If you're using this for your talent stacker project, summary is just going to be the title. You give it a description, you assign it to somebody, you click create, and you have your first ticket in there. You had a comment, Peter?
I was going to say, back when you're on the issue type screen, just show that for a second.
Yep.
You can see how easy it is to add fields, right? So it's very simple, drag and drop. It's gonna ask you what type of field do you want, what do you want it, what do you want to name it. So pretty easy. You don't have to be very technical. You certainly don't have to be certified in anything to figure it out. You just need to know where to go and how to get to these types of screens.
Yep. Workflow is how you kind of move through your project. I didn't get into this too much. Every change I kept trying to make didn't work for me. But this is where you can add different statuses, like when you're building your path inside of Salesforce, if you have additional steps that you need a ticket to go through. So you may have to do, in progress, resource gathering, there could be anything inside of that. What are some of the ones that you have inside of the company project, Peter?
So we have client input needed. And, you see at the top, or in the workflow, it'll ask you what type of status do you want it, right? Do you want it to be an in-progress status, done status? Those each have different meanings. So depending on the type of status it's in, not in a done status, you won't be able to close the sprint. So there's some nuances there, but, you can add it there. And then once you update the workflow in the top right, it'll show up on your, you also have the option there if you don't want to add it to all different types, right? You don't just want to add it to stories, just want to add it to the, or add it to bugs, do things like that. You can get into it, like the workflow itself can be, again, one of the pros and cons of Jira can be either as simple as you want or as complicated as you want, right? So there's another button at the top, we don't have to get into it here, but transition. So you can actually prevent the flow of tickets, right? So if it can't go backwards in the status, can only go forward. You can't go from to do to done because you need it to stop at a stage of testing, right? So you can build all sorts of guardrails around it if you want to, depending on the size, complexity, number of users that are in a particular project. Generally, you don't have to go to that level of detail, but in some of your enterprise organizations where you may have multiple teams, multiple development orgs in there, you might want to do something like that, but for the most part, you can make it pretty seamless.
There was a question about how to add Confluence to this. While I get to that, many pop-ups. So you'll click on the 9-dot menu for that, and then click on Confluence. I believe you have to go through a little bit of the same setup for it to create it, but as long as you sign up with the same thing, it should keep them all linked to each other. So let me switch back over. Am I still signed in to my org somewhere? All right, so back in mine, I'm gonna give you a peek of what, find it. There we go. So yeah, click on the 9-dot, it'll let me switch over to my Confluence project. What's really great in here is that you can bidirectionally link things between Confluence and Jira. So if you're editing a document, I could say, hey, this lead is related to a specific ticket. So do /Jira, and then you could search either by keywords, or if you know the issue number, do a search for it. You can link any or all of those tickets to the specific document. And then what that's going to do is in those 3 tickets in Jira, it's going to have a link back to this Confluence page. That way, if you created let's say you've done some review about what's going to happen with this next feature that you've documented and everything, and then you need to be able to refer back to that, or you need to add tickets that reference back to that page. In Jira, you can do the same thing. So let me go back over to that. So the same way that I grabbed a reference to a ticket, I can also edit my description /conf for how to link back to Jira, or how to Confluence. May depend on my object. If you get it set up correctly, it's really obvious how to do it. Link issue. Yeah, there we go. So it's the link issue option, and then link Confluence page. And then you search, by the title. It's back to my lead page. I link it, and now this ticket and that page are forever linked until one of those gets deleted. Let's see. So Bruce, I didn't actually have to give any technical information other than that I knew what Salesforce was. Orion has just about the easiest possible interview service you could go through, because the answer was, hey, we got you to this point. We assume that you know enough about Salesforce to learn how to do what we're doing, which is awesome. And it's what every company should do, instead of making you go through 37 interviews and a week-long build project just to prove something. Yeah, poor Vicky's about to be slammed by emails. I'm going to get an earful when I'm in New York next week. Also,
No.
Peter, I want a tour of the Salesforce Tower while I'm there. So I'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
I'll have to make a trip in.
Do it. Come on into the city. Any questions before we wrap this thing up and let you guys
this
get
is
out of here?
Christy. I have a question.
Yeah.
If I set one of these up, basically like everything I would need to ask or need to do on a new project, is there a way to copy it and make it like a template so that I can copy it from project to project and then just make modifications?
You would be setting it up, I would assume, as the company project, which I've not ever dealt with. So that would be a question for Peter on how that process actually works to create those.
It depends on what you would want to carry over. So there are 2 options. Like we were talking about before, if you use a company project, the customization around the new field, the workflow, the statuses within the workflow, that as a company project will carry over. I do think that there's also an option to clone a project. Now, depending on the size of your project, right, it could do more harm than good if then you have to go and delete some of the tickets or, to get back to square one. But if you're looking to have more of a cookie cutter type template, I would definitely recommend setting up a company managed project. What I've done before is have one that's company managed, almost make your own template, right? And then not add tickets or not use it as a working project, then just leave it. Jira doesn't charge you by the number of projects, which is great, right? So you can start a project and just leave it there as your shell. And then the settings from that will go down to new projects.
Okay, thank you.
So, and there's quite a few other ways, these things can be set up. So like the big project that I was working at my old company, I had probably 20 steps in the specific project that I was working on, because I was having to gather external resources and then get licensing taken care of, with third parties, and then go to yet another party to get files for things, and then build them out and test it and release and test again and make sure it was in our store. So you can have as many steps in a project as you need, and they can circle back to each other. So like if it got to my testing phase and it failed, or we found, some kind of an issue with the file, it would get kicked back to an in progress stage, which meant that either I had to look into what I had messed up on my my compiling, or it would mean that a developer would have to go look in, the software to figure out what they had, what wasn't working correctly, and would need to get changed from there. I'm gonna switch one more screen, show you one more thing from Atlassian's website, and I'll drop this link in the chat as well. So this is Atlassian's Agile Manifesto. They kind of took over the Agile world. It kind of started as a big open source kind of project, and they just took it and ran with it, and have made it what it is today. It's great information if you're interested in the Scrum side of things. This is certainly a page that you will come across, and something that you'll read lots of supporting articles for, and lots of hate articles about, depending on what side of a project people are on. I also would recommend doing the Agile Trailhead modules. So they're really good high-level introduction to this world, of what Agile means, what a sprint is, what a Scrum Master is, what Kanban views, Agile sprints versus waterfall, 1,001 terms that you'll run into in the real world, that you can start throwing around in your interviews to make it sound like you know a lot more, just to impress people and hope that they don't ask any follow-up questions on you. But if they do, you'll know how to have this link open in the background. You can quickly search while they're looking at it. But I would encourage you guys to take a look at that page. It gets into a lot of the terminology for it. I know, Anita, you're a certified Scrum Master. We've got a few other people in the Talent Stacker world that have gone that route as well. So it is certainly something to look at. It's not necessarily a certification that everybody needs, but if that's a role that you find yourself moving towards, it would certainly be a great option to look into, as well as the Jira certifications. I don't know if I can find those real quick or not. I don't know where they hide that information. Yep, looks like Jared's the biggest fan of Jira in the crowd tonight. So, but if there's no more questions, that's all I have. Thank you guys for coming out. Thanks to Peter for pulling an hour of time out tonight.